Okay, and we're live.
Right. Already have a first question. So hey everyone, thank you for joining us, for calling one of us on the phone to ask questions maybe. See everyone is so excited.
Yeah.
So we're kicking off with this episode of the Node Foundation and the OpenJS Foundation's security working group to discuss this is an Ask Me Anything. So this AMA, just kick any questions over to us. I'll introduce quickly just who's on the panel today. We have Michael Dawson, Vladimir de Turkheim, myself, and Ray. The nice one, and Rachel Romanoff as well. And so, first of all, thank you for joining us. If you're now on the live call or the recorded one, just some cleanup stuff so that you know how to do this. If you want to shoot any questions over, basically we have this form over on the that you can submit a Google form. So basically, if you find the OpenJSF on Twitter, there's a Twitter. You should easily find it probably on the top one. Just go there and submit a question. You can also basically probably tweet towards any of us on the panel here as well. We'll probably monitor and ask through that. And without further ado, I guess I'll go ahead and let the folks introduce themselves. So Michael, do you want to start? You're the first one on my screen.
Okay, yeah. I'm Michael Dawson, IBM's community lead for Node.js. That lets me spend a lot of time in the community. I'm a member of the technical steering committee and a member of a number of the working groups. I haven't been quite as active as recently in the security working group, but it is an area that I have an interest. As people said to me yesterday, you can see I have a background in Node.js, but I also have a background in security from some earlier jobs where I worked on some crypto products and working on, physical and information type security.
Michael, I already have one question for you, and that is, when you worked on crypto, did you roll your own crypto? It's a tricky question.
Yeah, we didn't make our own crypto. It was back in the days of DES and triple DES, and actually, things like RSA and public key was just starting to come into play. So
sounds good. All right, Vladimir, over to you.
Oof, I'm Vlad. I'm way less than everywhere on the Node.js project that Michael. I think a couple of years ago, Michael took some vacation, and half of the working group of the Node.js project were actually inactive. I'm mostly focusing on the security working group and trying to add some instrumentation-friendly features into Node.js. You might know me for the async local storage, which I am one of the main author of. If you don't know about this awesome API, it's not really about security, but it should change the way you see Node.js and you code with Node. So take a look at that and ping on that.
Yeah, that's definitely a good one.
Yeah, I was so happy to get that merged. It's pretty new. It's like February merged. When I'm not doing goofy stuff on the Node.js project, I have a day work at a company named Screen, where we actually do application security. So I'm someone who works full-time on Node.js security and web security at large. And that's pretty much how I got into this whole AMA, actually.
Well, Vladimir, thanks for the ping on the async stuff. I mean, that's been incredible work and going to be super useful.
But who are you, Liran? Who are you, Liran? Can you introduce yourself too?
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I'm part with together with Michael and Vladimir on the security working group for Node. Have been doing a lot of community JavaScript and security stuff, all over the past recent years. I'm a developer advocate at Snake, where we do dev first security. So I'm really honored and happy to do this AMA here, and I think we already have some questions, and maybe even one on the Twitch for you, Vladimir. With that hacker thing coming up there. So do we maybe want to just give just a brief overview of what is the security working group? Does anyone want to take this up?
I'm happy to jump in on that. Like the security working group actually was formed, and I forget how many years ago, but it was around the time that there was the donation of the Node Security Project database. So one of the areas that it's focused on has been, taking vulnerability reports and adding to that database. It's also focused on, areas where we can provide, guidance or techniques for the larger module ecosystem to improve security or to make things easier for maintainers to do that. What it isn't is it's not necessarily focused on Node core security. Things like vulnerabilities that are reported to the core project are handled through the TSC and some other processes. Security releases again are something that is handled by the Node core and the technical steering committee. So I'd say it focuses on security, but not for Node core itself not necessarily, but more on the ecosystem and what we can do in terms of the Node ecosystem and the modules. I don't know, Vladimir, Loren, if I've missed out anything on that front.
I think that's a pretty good overview. Vladimir, do you want to add anything?
No, it seems pretty accurate and comprehensive.
Yeah, I'd say we aren't running for a long time. I think it was since 2016, the end of that, where everything got, quite busy with more people. I remember my first year on the Node Security Working Group. It was super hectic and busy in a good way. I guess I kind of owe it back to get busy on that again. But I mean, Michael, your description is already like kind of like relating to one of the questions we have, which is, what are the general responsibilities of the Node Security Working Group, right? Like, what are the charters? What are we kind of like tasked to do? I think you had like a really good observation. There's like, it's kind of like a split. There's the ecosystem security working group, which is kind of like what we're trying to become, more like ecosystem responsibility. Like you mentioned, the NPM modules and so on. And then there's the other side of it, which is more core-related, like the Node core-related security activities, whether that's crypto and other tasks to it, right?
Yep. Yeah, and if people want to look specifically at what the charter is, you can go to Node.js/security-working group, and there's a charter section that will like introduce you to the very specific things that we've defined there.
True. And I think it's also worth like noting, I guess for me before joining, things have seemed, very, very, very big and massive from outside. Like, what is the Node project? How do you get involved? It's like very opaque. But it's really worth noting here, like a lot of the things we do, like basically everything we do, except, critical stuff like, triaging the vulnerability reports, which requires its own discrete way of doing it. Everything is pretty transparent. So like that link that we'll share later on Twitter and what Michael had just provided you, that's basically has the repository. Everything is very transparent. Any pull requests, changes, any issues, any things you want to chime on. The Node Security Working Group is also having this one monthly call every time. So we actually have one next week on the 13th of July. So if you want to jump up, ask any questions. You can also add questions, by the way, here to the YouTube chat too as well for the AMA. So it's very open, and we're always looking for new people to join us. Give us a new fresh perspective and so on. So there's definitely that to the project if you wanted to get involved.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point in that, I hear that, the project itself is quite big. There's lots going on and can be a little bit intimidating sometimes for people to get involved. Like you said, everything is really transparent, but sometimes I think it's more the fear of the unknown than anything else. And I think that the working groups in general are a great way to actually get to meet a few of the people. I'm always surprised at like how few people actually are driving things. So if if you imagine that, it's a huge project with lots and lots of collaborators, which we do have a good number of collaborators, but there's lots of things going on so that, the people in each of the different areas, it's not like you're going to come into a group of 50 or whatever. It's usually, 4 or 5, regular members. And it's a great way to get to know them, make the contacts. And so if you look for a working group that's kind of in your interest area, it's a great way to understand more about the project, figure out that it's just, people and, people who are friendly, because the project's very focused on making sure that everybody's friendly and, you know, helps new people. So it's a great way to get in, and you know, we'd love to see more people who are interested in security come out to the security working group.
Actually, the journey into contributing to Node, and if that's interesting, I can talk quickly about mine. It started by randomly tweeting a lot about Node and writing articles and proposing content for the defunct evangelism working group. And at one point, I saw that the security working group was being bootstrapped and working full-time in security for Node.js. I was like, I'm better inside that than outside. And little by little, I just learned to meet people, how the project works. And it becomes quickly from the people who make Node, them, to Michael Dawson and Targos and Miles and Anna. Oh yeah, I know them. I see them twice a year, and they are my friends. And just becoming like this small world. And just looking back, you're just impressed by the journey you had from just tweeting stuff about Node and ending up and in email that, and that's actually accessible to anyone. We write bugs, some of us more than others, mostly me, I write a lot of bugs, and we are not superhuman, we don't have deep science, and I'm really happy when I see new contributors coming to the Node project, highlighting security stuff we haven't seen, fixing bugs we haven't seen, and the hard part of the job is how do we make them know that they can regularly be involved in the community, and how can we invite them? And I think that's the part where working group, as you said, is a good entry point, because you start to contribute, you meet the people, and you end up peering Node and getting commit rights on that after a couple of months or years.
Yeah, so Vladimir, since you mentioned up, you're writing a lot of bugs and introducing a lot of bugs. Gonna take you up on that, and maybe I'll connect that to if you can share and tell us a bit about this bug bounty program that the Node Foundation has. And what is it? What are we gonna do there? How is that related?
So yeah, that's an interesting question. So there's actually one thing about bugs that I like a lot, is that some of them can be security related, not all of them, but some bugs actually provide security exploits. And
some bugs you can even get money for, right? You can actually make money by finding security bugs. It's crazy.
That's actually the good part, is that we have a sponsor, which is the IBB, the Internet Bug Bounty. So it's a pool of funding companies. I think there are big players and smaller fishes inside that. And actually, those people are willing to pay to make Node.js and its ecosystem safer. We also have a few private companies who pledged money directly, which means that right now we have a way, and we have the fund to pay people for making the Node.js ecosystem or Node.js core, even if that's another program outside of the security working group, safer. Meaning that if you find good bugs, and good bugs are not missing semicolons or very small things. I know that request library can be used to ping outside APIs. Don't call an SSRF on request, please. Or don't highlight bugs in the test of libuv. We had a security report for a test that was injectable in a vendor project, which on AIX only, not on popular runtime OS. So please be serious, and depending on the popularity of the repo and the severity on the bug, we can award things. Like I think last week we awarded $250 for a serious issue in a very popular repo. And that's the kind of thing where you can make a bit of money and fame by making the world a better place.
Where can they find us? What's the place to
good
to
question.
send these people to?
We also are blessed by another sponsor, which is HackerOne, which provides us with free HackerOne programs. So you can find us on HackerOne ecosystem, or HackerOne Node.js Core for Core. And both of the links are available on the Node.js website under the security tab. So
Sure.
just go on nodejs.org, click security, and all the links will be there. And you will be able to spam us with a lot of very critical vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I'll take this opportunity to poke at a little bit more painful side of this. The bug bounties are great, but really, you know, we'd like to encourage, I think, working closely with the project versus looking for bugs to be able to make money, or, you know, it's great to get a bit of a bonus there. But there has been a little bit of friction in the community in terms of, you know, hey, people get paid to report bugs, but then the maintainer has to go and fix them, and they're not necessarily getting paid. And okay, so you got, what does your shirt say there? I didn't quite catch it. It was like pay the.
Let me remove the virtual background.
Okay.
But I actually just got that delivered. I had to answer a survey, and I got this for free.
Pay the
maintainers, right?
Awesome.
The fix bounty too.
Yes.
So yeah, I thought I'd just see, like, Loren and Vladimir, your take on that, because it's great that we have the bug bounty in place, but I can see that there's a bit of tension between, like, hey, yeah, we're incenting people to generate work for a different group, and, you know, how do we deal with that going forward?
That's actually a great question, and that's actually the question about monetizing open source, and on a very specific part, which is, okay, you've got monetizing people for their daily work, and you've got monetizing, paying people for saving everyone's production or infrastructure by fixing the critical security bugs. And that's the question: is money the solution? Is pledging? I don't really have a solution. Last year, 2 years ago, I was invited onto a panel handled by a society named the Maintainers, if I recall properly. And we did a daily workshop with a philosopher about who will maintain the maintainer. Where do people who maintain code and make the thing available and work for a long time get their retribution? Because we've got the culture on the internet and open source in programming to reward the creator, the first creator, and they get the glory and they get to sell the project, for instance, in some cases. But what happens for the other people? And right now, the Node.js project has a few very ultimately active members. I think if we run the commits by member over the last 6 months or 12 months, we would realize that some people are very invested in fixing bugs and making the project really powerful. How do we retribute them? Do we want to retribute them? Do they want to be retributed? And actually, I think I don't have the answer. It's too big for me. I'm just one maintainer.
One thought that popped into my mind was, we have bug bounties for reporting a vulnerability. I wonder if there should be like a bonus to bring, like, if you report a vulnerability and you come with a fix.
That
right?
would be interesting. Yeah. So like,
right? So
yeah,
make it easier for maintainers to kind of, like, you know, just merge the code, or is
right, exactly, like
already have that.
Right, you know, because that I've seen that happen sometimes, where it's like, hey, I found this problem and here's the fix. And if it's something where you can just say, oh, okay, well, that's good, we understand. You know, the fix often makes it very clear what the impact is going to be to, you know, putting the fix into the code, if it passed the test. So that would actually make it a lot easier, I think, on maintainers to say, okay, and probably, you know, there'd be cases where it might need to be reworked or tweaked, but I think, like, so yeah, that just popped in my mind that, like, hey, maybe there could be like, hey, you get the base bounty, but you get double if you've got the fix as well, or something. So
that's awesome.
It depends, because a lot of so I would like that, because it will drive toward a change of mind in the bug bounty scene, because bug bounting is actually a sport, and you've got people who do that competitively, and that's actually a thing. But I remember a longer article from someone who shall not be named, but which was about, hey, you found a bug a security bug in my huge code base. Well, now I have to fix it. And I agree with you. Maybe we could have a bonus, an extra reward, or maybe split the bounty between the person who fixed the bug and person who found it.
Yeah, that's another good option. Just thinking of different ways to like you said, sort of change the dynamics a little bit to make it we're trying to solve the end problem as opposed to just the first part.
Yeah. Also, it's worth noticing that it depends also who owns the repo. So in the case of the Node.js project, it's the dynamic we've been discussing. On the ecosystem side, we happened to meet bugs on repos that belongs to commercial organizations that are not community maintained. And actually, the first time it happened, all of that is public, but the company actually, it was before we had bug bounties for the ecosystem. The company actually awarded $500 bounty to the person who reported it. And I guess the dynamic is different when it's a community project that is maybe unfunded or sponsored by the employers of the people who work on that, or projects that are not fully open source because they belong to a company. They are not community driven and belong to a company. I mean, I would be less keen toward changing the dynamic for that because there's already someone paying and someone handling the dynamic. But for the Node.js project, yeah, we probably have a story here that we want to write together.
Yeah, no, I'd agree that, the answer for open source projects versus proprietary projects would be different there. So.
Yeah, so I guess we already have, if you wanted to like volunteer and jump up with something to work with a security working group, we already have one idea from Michael. Like maybe we have this bug bounty kind of like policy. It's just a README file, that we go through. So you can read through that, if that idea from Michael makes sense. And Vladimir commentary on that as well. You can go ahead and push that into maybe a PR or open an issue suggestion, and we can see how to kind of like weave it in. Worth noting, we also have this idea of trying to see with this problem of like open source and maintainers, right? There's a friction there, and we're trying to make their lives also easier as much as we can. And so we're trying to figure out how we can use the HackerOne as a platform as well to also reward maintainers for their time fixing something, not just security researchers. So if you have ideas there as well on how to make that work, since that's not like an out of the box working thing with HackerOne, definitely chime in and let's see what we can do together on this.
Yeah, I think there was a comment on some of the discussion on the YouTube chat around there are some challenges around basically being able to provide a patch, because that we have thought about the responsible security disclosures, but that part might actually need some enhancement as well to allow it to come along with or have the patch. I guess today we use HackerOne where people can open issues, and in that issue we could certainly attach a patch, I assume, right?
Yeah, so we can get patches if you're doing this through HackerOne, and this is something that we usually do get them.
But I think Brian's point is interesting. I think GitHub is rolling out a feature with private PRs, but I don't know how that works for people who are outside of the organization regarding access to that. Also, hi, Brian, who is another member of the working group. But yeah, I think right now the only flow is to attach a patch file on the HackerOne and apply it from private PRs or repos.
Yeah, that's what we've seen so far. All right, so as we're talking about a lot about like patches and fixes and maintainers and open source security, I'll go ahead and ask for this panel, what are some challenges that we're seeing as a security working group that works in this space with the community? What are some challenges we're having?
I will take that one, I think, if that works. I think fatigue and the amount of work is actually really big. And
is that on the maintainer side or on the working group side? What do you think?
On the working group side, at least for handling ecosystem vulnerabilities, actually this I am not involved a lot anymore in triaging vulnerabilities because I've done that intensively for a couple of years at the beginning, and
Definitely a time-consuming process.
Exactly, it's energy and time-consuming. Also, you're between the hammer and the metal, meaning that you've got the bug bounty coming from one direction, the bug report, and you have to evaluate if that's a valid thing, and sometimes it's really hard and challenging. You've got the maintainer that might ignore you or might take time to answer. That's the worst case scenario. I'm doing the worst case scenario. Usually maintainers are pretty happy, and we've got great interaction with them because the Node.js community is amazing. But in the worst situations, maintainers are unhappy or they ignore you. And at the end you published, and maybe some people are not happy with the vulnerability you published. Maybe they are right, maybe they are not. I'm not here to debate that. But you might have also, after the public backslashing, and it's actually an energy and time-consuming process. And actually, we've got a discussion into reducing our scope, because the panel of vulnerability monitoring has changed. When we started a few years ago, there was the Node.js security project giving up on that. There was Sneak big on that, and that was pretty much all the actors in vulnerability management for Node.js. Now NPM has gone this way, GitHub is doing it, no, they are the same entity. And things are changing. And maybe the need for the security working group handling the reports for the whole NPM ecosystem, which is still exponentially growing in number of packages. Maybe this need, and that's my personal opinion, maybe this needs start to be outdated. Also, another thing that changed a lot is that the Node.js Foundation merged into the OpenJS Foundation, meaning that we are sibling projects from amazing stuff like Node, Red, ESLint. I think Grant is part of that. And maybe we should be focusing in being a service team and a bug bounty team for the project of the foundation, rather than handling the whole NPM scope, where GitHub and NPM can do that better than us now, and obviously other commercial companies. And that's a personal opinion. I'm not a spokesperson nor from Screen or the OpenJS Foundation or the Node.js Security.
Yeah, so if I have to kind of like recap that, there's a fatigue coming up, both I think on maintainers as well as the working group individuals. To there's a lot of context switch. It's not like, I think the context is when you trash a vulnerability, it's not like you go through it, you spend 1 hour or so, and then it's an end-to-end thing and you finish it and so on. There's reaching out to the maintainers, then maybe they reply back a day later, then you need to go into the issue again, see what you are working on, see if what they comment makes sense or not, connect maintainers and bug researchers, and now take that and multiply that across maybe tens or hundreds of reports that might have in your queue to kind of like trash. And the context switching and that work is, I think, what we're finding as a fatigue for the individuals, but nevertheless super important. And so kind of like your second statement there, Vladimir, is maybe we're trying to focus it, because for a long time, I think, for the working group, we were also receiving reports for modules that have tens of downloads a week or a month, and it's not that they're less important, so we took them on as well, but they're just less impactful. Less impactful if there's a vulnerability and something that gets downloaded 10 times a week. That's not gonna be a really good return on investment for us, for example, working to triage it. And so we're trying, we try to do a couple of things there, like creating buckets of reports. And so there's like low and medium and maybe high kind of like impactful modules. And now I think with your kind of like focus here is like we're trying to also maybe see if there's something like more specific to the OpenJS Foundation that we're trying to kind of like refocus the work of the working group, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, I mean, certainly for me, it's that the point you made about the landscape having changed. You know, at the time of formation is, I think it was like 4 years ago, as Lorraine was recalling, you know, the database needed a home, and, you know, there was concern over having a, you know, sort of a neutral database and making sure that there was a place. It seems like, you know, time goes past, and, you know, we're more comfortable with the alternatives. They're more defined, and so it may make sense to just defer to those reporting processes for the bulk of the projects and modules. As long as we, you know, if we've got a good home for that, then, you know, as you said, it's a lot of work. We haven't necessarily been able to keep up with all of them, so, you know, just channeling them to the other ones could make a lot of sense. I think in terms of the, you know, having joined the OpenJS Foundation, security still is a challenging, I shouldn't say problem, but it's like, it's a fairly specific technical area. And I think not everybody, it's hard for people, for every maintainer to be up to speed and to figure out what best practices are. And so I think there's still a very strong value proposition for a group of people coming together, whether it's called the Node.js Security Working Group or it's called something else under the foundation, to come together and to try and help, you know, potentially with a first priority on the projects that are part of the OpenJS Foundation, because as a group, we want to make sure that, you know, we're doing the right thing on the security front, but also, like, you know, defining best practices and things that are applicable to the broader ecosystem to make maintainers' lives easier. A very concrete example of that is Marseille helped to define, you know, a baseline responsible reporting guidelines, you know, in terms of, you know, how you should let people report security vulnerabilities to your project. He participated and defined that through the package maintenance working group, which is a great step. He then leveraged that to a PR we have and a proposal going through at the OpenJS Foundation as a set of minimal requirements that we'd like all of the projects who join the foundation to meet. So again, you know, having, you know, it's not necessarily a super high bar, but starting with a bar that says, you know, all the projects in the foundation will at least have, you know, a way you can report these, in a way, you know, disclose them and so forth. So I think that there's just so many areas of security that are very specialized, that if we can bring together the companies and the people who are experts in that to figure out how to help the rest of the ecosystem, that's still a really good role. And so it's figuring out how, you know, we move from what made sense 4 years ago to what makes sense today. And I know there's the ongoing discussions there, but it's good to chat about it and make people aware about that a bit more.
True, yeah, and it's really good you're mentioning that, because I think maybe kind of like a hidden value in that work of like having that kind of policy for the like broader foundation project is it's a good reference, right? Like if I'm building a, you know, a new project, then, you know, I want to see what, you know, what other fellows are doing, you know, in this space, like, you know, what kind, you know, if I want to see what kind of like testing tooling they have, or like what kind of you know, other project references, you know, I'd go to the repo and look at their packages and how do they set it up, what kind of like dependencies they use and so on. But then if I have the same question for security, I can also see the same thing, right? I can see what kind of security guidelines did they embrace. So like maybe I want to be like up to par in like the same bar of quality. And I think that's kind of like maybe another reference that we could give the community as well.
Yeah, certainly making the foundation the sort of source of thought leadership on that front, and good examples, I think, is, you know, a good thing to work on.
Definitely. So when we talked about, you know, the OpenJS Foundation for a bit, you know, how its establishment also, I think, impacts the working group in this sense. It's, you know, more project to work with and so on. I think maybe the refocusing as well touches on that. How do you think that the greater Node community itself can help the security working group and the project, maybe the Node project itself? What do you think should be done there? Is there like some activities or some volunteer work we could specifically call out?
From my perspective, you know, I'd really like to see, you know, any of the companies who have a security focus, security background come together, you know, and discuss under the sort of foundation umbrella what we can do to help maintainers and help the ecosystem sort of raise the bar, even just a little bit incrementally. I don't think I have any of the answers. Like I'm not in that specific, like I'm not in a company that's trying to, help build the ecosystem security level. But I think, if we can bring enough people together from the different organizations who are focused on that, it's kind of helping to figure out the incremental steps we can take, like the baseline security, responsible security reporting guidelines. What would be the next step after that, right? And then help to put those into place.
Also, there's one big part of web security, and I know that Node is not only the web, but it's one of the main usage of Node.js that is often forgotten. People talk about vulnerable modules, about best practice writing modules, but at the end of the day, the payload where the hacking money happens is often in SQL injections, XSS, unsafe code evaluation, and that's where I think I want to see the Node.js project and the Node community go to. Is we've got huge companies and small companies. They all have Node.js in production with web applications. They all have the same issue. How do I do authentication? How do I sanitize input? How do I make sure that the thing that goes to my database is trusted and trustable? What can we do in the framework, in the runtime, in the ecosystem to reduce the mistake area from everyone? Can we make the use of the modules safer by default? But not only, can we have DevSecOps people telling me, hey, what do I do for Node in production? Just plug that. You will get observability on the behavior of the users, and that's how you will get an overview of what's happening in the app. And that's a part that is actually not explored a lot. For instance, there has been a lot of discussions about syscall policies around Node.js and Dino, and they are great because they prevent a process from doing something unexpected. But what is worst is when a process is doing a syscall, it's a load to containing a malicious payload. And in that direction, I think as a community, we can do something as the Java world did at one point and try to move forward into making everyone's application and businesses safer.
I guess the thing that came to mind a little bit when you're talking about that is like some of our challenges, like the JavaScript ecosystem is great because we have so many choices on NPM, but it also becomes a challenge because there's so many different places that we could have security vulnerabilities introduced, right? And at some point, it could make sense to have some common components. One step is to try and encourage, say, some projects to join the OpenJS Foundation, which are, going to help provide, security qualities of service, which you're talking about. And or considering whether, and there's always discussions around small core, non-small core, in some of the discussions we had at the recent Collaborator Summit around what's important to make Node successful for the next 10 years, we started to get into a discussion of maybe something like a standard library makes sense where it's not part of core. But so anyway, just thinking of ways where the surface that we need to make sure is secure is reduced might be another sort of avenue to think about in terms of, for SQL injection, what are the typical ways that gets through, and is there any library that could be, under the OpenJS Foundation or in the standard library, or in some way where it's, we have a little bit less of a surface for that we have to try and make secure, while of course balancing the the great innovation that we get from the large ecosystem and trying things out. I don't know what the right answer is on that, but making some progress on that is probably going to help too.
At least we have an exciting future next 10 years with Node.js.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a lot of food for thought from both of you on that. So, all right, let's go back to some questions that we've got from everyone. And by the way, thank you all for sending these questions. So let's get started with one of them. So one is, I wonder if some security issues are being replicated over and over and could be caught with a pattern search that could be ran to catch it before it becomes a bug.
I will take that one, if I may. It's an interesting one. So there's actually tools for static analysis of code. And for certain kind of vulnerabilities, they work somehow well, like detecting that you are coding a database call and detecting that there have been a string concatenation before from rec. Yeah, that works well. The issue is that JavaScript is the most dynamic language, in the most used language in the world. And there is so much that static analysis can do. There will be, I've got this, I always say that funny, but if there is something weird that can be done in JavaScript, it will be done and it might even get popular. And that's the thing with JavaScript, you never know if static instrumentation will do the trick. It will save you 80% of the time. So it's probably worth scanning whole GitHub JavaScript world for that. But there will always be this 20%, whilst in less dynamic language, it's more a 2% situation.
I still think 80%, if you could catch 80% of them, that'd be a big win. So
it's a good, yeah. For a low effort, kind of like, automating all of this, it's going to be a good 80-20 rule.
I do know though that I haven't had a lot of experience, but I have had some experience where we ran the code scanning tools, and the challenge was always there was lots and lots of false positives. So it wasn't like, the linter, you put in your pre-commit hook and it tells you and you just update. And my experience, at least, I don't know if that's changed, is that the static analysis often took a fair amount of work after the fact to understand, was it really a vulnerability or not, and so forth.
That's very true, and that's also my experience with most static analysis in JavaScript so far.
Okay, so
next episode is going to be about static code analysis and linters for sure. I can already see this coming.
Certainly, we want to get to the point. It's like, how do we get to the point like the linters where, I don't know, I run the linter, it tells me to do something, I just do it, right? If you got to the same thing with the security side, it would be great.
So you do what the machine says, right, Michael?
It's like, okay, if we've agreed that, we're going to have semicolons here, it's like, yep, I'll do that, right? So yeah.
I could expand that. If I hack into my coworker's linter, I can get them deliver me coffee at my desk, right?
I like this. I like this.
Well, I guess I didn't mean I changed the code to do what it told me, but yeah, okay. Got to be a bit careful.
All right, cool. Next up is a question: how to secure JSON data transmissions because everyone can see it. You wanna take that one? Is that basically talking about SSL? Are we're gonna go that way?
That's what jumps into my mind anyway.
Right.
I think that the answer it's HTTPS.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So basically you want to encrypt communication, and you don't want to obfuscate anything, because security through obscurity actually doesn't work at all. But you want to encrypt the data set to make sure that only the issuer and the intended consumer can know what's inside it, and avoid unsafe encryption level of SSL.
And really, I think the trend is to just turn on HTTPS for everything, right? I mean, I think the standard and things that I see are pushing you more and more towards, you just have everything HTTPS, and if you get an HTTP request, you just redirect to that, right?
Yeah, it's basically a no cost today, right?
Especially since you have things like Let's Encrypt or even hosting providers that handle that. I mean, if you put your code, I think on Heroku it's SSL, it's HTTPS by default, and you don't even have to pay for your certificate as it was the case like 6 years ago. I think I've read that Firefox is trying to slowly, by default, disable HTTP without the S part. One point, have HTTP, unsafe HTTP, as shamed as some old technology that might have been used to make games, and I won't name because I'm not a mean person, but everyone knows what I'm
You mean like
talking about.
hashing passwords with MD5? Is that bad?
Yeah, like that. Or I was talking about like Flash players. You don't see
every year. And it's like, okay, well, there must be a way to get past this, but you got to work harder. So yeah, I think it's just we're being pushed or nudged. Maybe I should say nudged in that direction. And Let's Encrypt you mentioned is, yeah, that's actually, you know, I think they've done it. It's great that you can get certificates for free, and they've got a fair amount of the plumbing. I know I set up an Nginx server. I can't even remember how long ago now, and it just must be rotating the certificates for me. And so I haven't really had to think about it since. So.
Yep. True. So, I mean, we're kind of like summarizing here. So I think HTTPS is kind of like a by default thing. If you go to the HTTP archive, that's just httparchive.org, you can see they're running a lot of like over time kind of like reports. So you can see the adoption of HTTPS generally, you know, around the web. I mean, that's really interesting to see. Has some like JS related metrics and performance. So this is definitely going to be, I guess, our conclusion here, just HTTPS by default. So next question is, recently looking over the application Pencil V3 made with Electron, a site SketchUp program, would be good to have a best practice module for designing a site with security at the top of the queue. So I'm wondering if kind of rephrasing what this is trying to say is, I think it's kind of like what we touched before with, you know, Michael and Vladimir, you're both saying, you know, we should have like a best practices reference, like a security guide. This even sounds to me a bit maybe like the OWASP's GOAT project, you know, like those vulnerable by default kind of project where someone would want to see, you know, what are like, but maybe from like not the vulnerable by default, but a secure by default, right? They want to see what are the guidelines to follow. Is that what you make of it?
That's what it sounds like, yeah.
Okay.
Also,
it's a good project idea if someone wants to kick it off.
Also, I think it's related also to this potential standard library that might happen, where, okay, here are also the safe bricks to build your applications.
Right. The challenge, I think, and why there isn't already an easy one we can just point to, is that there's lots of, when we say an application, there's lots of variation, right? So in this case, it mentions like, you know, Electron. So maybe there's one of those for Electron, but then there's probably also one with building, you know,
CLIs
APIs
or
with
general web. Yeah.
CLIs, building something with Express, you know, using GraphQL. There's probably, you know, a bunch of different examples. That's, I guess, another area I think, you know, maybe we can think about how the foundation can help is, like, how do you find those things, right? Like if they exist all right out there, how do we, you know, and I'm in JavaScript, I'm doing something, I'm security conscious, so I know that I should be looking out for certain things. How do I find those, right? Like, you know, and what should that list be even? You know, so that's something that I think that, you know, a group of people who are interested, that it always comes down to, like, the foundation doesn't do anything on its own, right? It's not that the foundation has a huge staff of people who are going to go out and write these things. It's that it can be the focal point and provide resources like, you know, repos and, you know, use of Slacks and videos and stuff like this. So, you know, it's for, you know, if we can have people who are passionate providing the place where they can come together and you know, collate some of this information, work on this information, or at least just call out that it's missing in areas and stuff.
Yeah, maybe a small plug is I maintain this repo called Awesome Node Security. It's kind of just curated kind of like links So, if you want to swing that around toward the foundation thing, if we want to take ownership versus if someone wants to just update it and send a pull request to a project of that can help others, just go ahead and do that.
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing. Like if there were new people wanting to get involved and having it in a sort of neutral location made sense and would grow
Yep, exactly.
contributions, that would make total sense. If it's just going to be continue with you doing all the work, then where it is maybe makes total sense as well. So
yeah, no, I don't want to do that all the work myself. So if someone wants to help out, definitely. So more questions. Let's see. We have something on malicious modules. Are malicious modules as common as they used to be? I feel like I haven't heard of many lately. What do you think? What is lately?
I'm feeling like I should knock on wood. Because I don't want one to come up next week.
You don't
right?
want to say now there's no new modules.
Yeah, that's right. Seems dangerous. I try not to be superstitious, but
I'd say that they are here. They are just not new. I mean, if I talk, for instance, about prototype pollution, was brand new 2 years ago, and now it's a common thing in JavaScript at large. And
I wonder if this is more like malicious, like modules by definition. And
yeah, I
think,
know.
Okay.
I mean, we have so many stories about that now malicious modules are just something part of the landscape. You see what I mean? We learn to live with them, and they don't make the headlines anymore. But I think they are still here. But also, they went to other ecosystems. Like there have been, if you follow PyPy, the typo squatting nightmares, the crypto miners nightmares, all
Ruby
happen.
gems, they'll have the same compromised modules or typo squatted.
Yeah,
that's true.
Hopefully it's a little bit more of a challenging environment for them, because there has been the awareness and the infrastructure like npm, and 2FA, but and npm is more on alert for them. And so I have some hope that like Vladimir said, they're still going to be there, but that it's a more challenging environment for them than it potentially was at one point. And users as well are more aware that you need to understand the software that you're using and put into production. It kind of fits into the larger sort of OSS challenges of not only do you need to be aware of it from the security standpoint, but
from the trust, maybe.
Yeah, that's from the trust side, but also from the, if you're critically dependent on it and you want it to be there tomorrow. So it may not be a security vulnerability, but if it just ages poorly, that can be just as big a business risk to you as a security vulnerability. That one of the best ways is to have the people from your company involved in those projects. And that way that what you're installing is something that is both safe and is doing the right things on the security front to keep it safe, as well as being properly maintained in all the other dimensions as well.
Yeah, and there's a comment here in the chat that kind of really related to that with malicious modules, and that is how to use forensics to also kind of like differentiate between malicious and unintended bugs, which is, I guess another problem of static code analysis, right? Like understanding what is the context of or the intention here of a problematic code from a security perspective.
That's something that's really hard, or really easy, but there is no in between. I mean, when you've got a PR coming from someone when you never know who has a GitHub account that has been inactive for 6 years or that's brand new, and the code introduces a vulnerability, even if that's hidden in a big thing, might be malicious. If there have been a publish on npm that has not been prefaced by a commit on GitHub, and you've got like a incoherent activity between npm and GitHub, then you can expect malicious. When it's a long time maintainer of a package that got popular, that have been maintained for 2 years, it's really easy to assume best intention.
Cool. We're almost wrapping up, so I'd say if there's any other questions coming over to the chat or submitting the form, maybe send them off now. And maybe before we kind of wrap up, Michael or Fabian, do you want to add anything as an open item here? Already like fatigue. It's called fatigue from chatting with me.
I think. So go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was about to say I think you should answer first.
Okay, I was just going to say that like my only sort of thoughts moving forward is I still don't quite think we have it figured out. You know, how we bring the right people, get the right critical mass. Security is obviously an important topic for all of the ecosystem, for the users, for the maintainers. And I'm still just want us to figure out how we under the umbrella of the OpenJS Foundation or the Node project, you know, have a very sort of vibrant and active community who are coming together to work on the problems together. And I don't think we've quite figured that one out. So I'm still trying to think of different ways that we can do that. I fit that, you know, it fits right into the discussion we've had about like how do we refocus the working group. I've got a proposal on collaboration spaces under the OpenJS Foundation to provide a venue for people to come together and sort of collaborate on topics. But it really all depends on getting, you know, the passionate and interested people to come out and participate. And so for me, that's, you know, on this front, that's still one of the areas for us to think about and figure out how we get that work all going. And I know as volunteers, it's really hard, but that's one of the things top of my mind.
Agree. Yeah, I definitely joined that call that, you know, this isn't like just a call to like join the working group. If you're passionate about security, definitely, you know, we love to work with you. But, you know, there's a bigger project here. There's like there's a build working group. There's a package maintenance working group. There's so many things where, you know, topics where if you are passionate about, this is definitely, you know, kind of like a call from us to ask you to, you know, everything is very transparent and open in the Node Foundation. So, you know, you can go ahead, you know, check out the repos, what people are talking about, you know, participate, see if you know, like the kind of like the focus areas of some of these repositories and topics, and, you know, you'll be very welcomely taken. All right, so I guess we are wrapping up. Any last words from either of you?
Thanks for having us, and thanks for moderating. It was great.
It was awesome.
Yep. Okay, so thank you all for joining us. Thank you for pushing out the questions towards us so we can discuss those items that are dear to your heart. Hoping to see you next time. And you can always ping us and find us on the Node Security Working Group repo. And just ping us if you have any other questions as well. Have a great day, everyone. And thank you, Michael, Vladimir, and Rachel for joining us.
Thanks.